The next factor that influences price that we're going to look at are those that are driven by the customer. One of the things I always like to think about when I'm talking about price is that the word price is always attached to what customers do. Costs are about what companies do. So now we're looking at customer perceptions and their influence on price. Customer perceptions involve a few different things. The consistency of positioning, remembering of course that positioning is in the minds of the consumer, their perception of value, something called elasticity of demand, that sounds like a fun economics concept to talk about, and of course price sensitivity. And price sensitivity is the one that is of particular importance to marketers. So we've done positioning, we've already talked about that. And I'm going to come back to perception of value and how that influences the price of the product towards the end of this lesson. But the idea of remembering, of course, that what customers perceive as the value of the product determines what they're willing to pay. But let's dive into a demand curve. Here it is. You might recognise it from economics. Now don't panic too much because we're not actually ever going to ask you to calculate one. But remember this very simple idea that basic economics tells us that the higher the price of the product, the less quantity of that product is demanded. Now as marketers we like to make some exceptions to the rule, and we've already alluded to the fact that sometimes there's a price quality relationship, in which case sometimes you can actually increase the quantity demanded of your product by increasing the price, because people will see it as luxurious or prestigious, and that might appeal to them depending on the type of value they're seeking. If you think of some of our examples about hedonic value that we've discussed earlier. Of course, if the value driver is a functional value driver, then this price quantity relationship will hold very true. So that's the economics side of it. But let's get into the more marketing perspective of demand curves, and we talk about the elasticity of demand. So, inelastic demand curves. When we have inelastic demand, we have low levels of price sensitivity, and I'll come to price sensitivity shortly. But an inelastic demand curve, it means it doesn't stretch. It's fairly rigid. So if the price does change, demand doesn't change very much. From a marketing perspective, that means that we know if we increase our prices, then in fact our total revenue will go up. People won't really stop buying the product, or not very many people will stop buying the product. A really good example of a product that is price inelastic is petrol. Now, I've been teaching marketing for over 15 years at Monash University, and in that time the price of petrol has more than doubled. However, I don't see any less students travelling to uni by car, or any less marketing lecturers travelling to uni by car. There hasn't been a great influx of Lycra and bicycles parked outside any of our buildings. We still believe that the product has value and it's something that we want or need. Therefore, even though prices are going up a lot, we still keep consuming the product. The other type of demand curve that we see is an elastic demand curve, what we talk about high levels of price sensitivity. In an elastic or stretchy demand curve, if price changes even a small amount, then the quantity demanded of that product changes a lot. So customers will stop buying the product if you raise your price very much. Alternately, if you decrease your price, you can increase consumption by quite a lot. In terms of our total revenue, if you put your price up, then your revenue will actually go down. The example we use here is going to the movies, actually going to a cinema. There's lots of different alternatives for these products, and that's one of the things that affects price sensitivity, and we'll come back to that just in a minute. So this idea of cinemas, if you change the price at a cinema, it will very much affect whether or not people go. And that's why they do things like have half price tickets or cheap tickets on a Tuesday. That's a day that they know not many people go for whatever reason, so they lower the price, and that means they can increase the quantity that is consumed. So think about that. Elastic demand, lots of change, lots of stretch in consumption. An inelastic demand curve is when you can change prices and it doesn't really affect the quantity that is demanded. Now, we've already mentioned this idea of price sensitivity. So price sensitivity is a concept, and this is the one that really relates to marketers. Demand curves, you'll learn about those in economics, but price sensitivity, this is the bit that marketers can influence. So, because this is about what our customers feel. How sensitive are they? If customers are highly price sensitive, then we will have an elastic demand curve. If we increase price, consumption will drop. So what we want are customers that are not price sensitive. We want customers that are not price sensitive. And there's a number of things that influence it. And therefore, as marketers, a number of things that we can do about it. So, if the product is perceived to be necessary or important to the consumer, their price sensitivity will be lower. If I have to have it, if I think it's really important, then I'll pay whatever I have to pay to get the product because I think it's necessary. If there are lots of substitutes, now a substitute is something else that will satisfy the need that I have. So if we go back to my petrol example, a substitute to driving my car to university would be to catch public transport, to ride a bicycle, to get a lift with a friend. They're substitutes. My need is transport to university. If there are lots of substitutes available that I think will satisfy my need, then I will become highly price sensitive. I'll be very sensitive to changes in price, and I will have, again, an elastic demand curve. So if you put your price up, then I'll stop using that product and use one of the alternatives if I believe they will fulfill my need. Perceived quality, prestige, or exclusiveness. As I said before, if we think that there is a strong price-quality relationship, then companies can actually put their prices up and I won't change my demand. So again, this idea of prestigiousness or quality results in low price sensitivity. If I have low sensitivity, you can increase the price and I won't change my consumption. We want customers with low price sensitivity. The proportion of expenditure relative to income. If the product represents a large proportion of my income, I am going to be more price sensitive. It has a bigger impact on me. So yes, whilst people who earn more money don't actually want to pay more money for the same product, trust me, I look for the cheap flight to Sydney just as much as you might do so. Because it represents a different proportion of my income, then my levels of price sensitivity will be lower. So that also determines this elasticity of demand. Now, the next factor we're going to talk about is the cost being borne by another party. I love this. If someone's taking me out to dinner, I don't look at the prices on the menu. So if someone else is paying for it, our sensitivity is reduced. Now, this could be because someone else is paying some of your fees for university. It could be that your work is paying for your car. Those are the kinds of situations that we talk about. In which case, and if you think about it, and we talked about buyer behaviour, and we talked about the different roles you might have, and we talked about the different requirements of the buyer and the user and the influencer and the payer. So this is this example. The person who is paying for the product is going to be much more price sensitive than the person who's using it. It's this idea. If someone else is paying for some or all of the product, your price sensitivity is much lower. And finally, if the product is used in conjunction with previously purchased assets. So what that means is, and a great example is the printer cartridges. We're not sensitive to the price of the cartridges because we need to use them with the printer which we already have. So we don't want to have to go out and buy a new printer, which means we'll be more accepting of a higher price for the cartridges because we want to make use of the existing asset. So they're the factors that affect price sensitivity. These are all things that marketers can affect. You can create a perception of importance or necessity about your product. You can create a sense of quality or prestigiousness about your product, therefore reducing price sensitivity. Depending how you sell your product and package it, you can mean that you can ensure that it has to be used with componentry that you also sell. You can determine who might be selling the other products. and you can create the perception that this is the only thing that will solve those problems. So you can use other elements of the marketing mix, particularly around product and communication, to influence people's levels of price sensitivity. Marketers want customers with low price sensitivity. It means they can charge more money for their product.